Hello, everyone, and I have Dr. Laurell here today again in our series of managing midlife mood and metabolism. And today we're going to talk about inflammation, neuroinflammation, and how there's that connection between neuroinflammation and depression. So we'll have a discussion today, and people have asked us about depression. So we thought to really tie it into the whole neuroinflammation concept. Hello, Dr. Laurell. Thank you for being here today. And what can you tell us about neuroinflammation?
Yeah, this is an incredibly important topic. We talk about all these different things that can contribute to depression, beyond the typical ones that are discussed. We talk about, how our gut health can contribute to depression and how stress can contribute to depression. Well, the thing that's in common with all of these is they ramp up the level of inflammation in our body. And we've all heard a lot more about cytokines over the last few years and their role in inflammation. Well, cytokines, those inflammatory molecules, can cross the blood-brain barrier. So if our body's inflamed, our brain gets inflamed, and this is a very common layer, if not the only cause of depression and also anxiety.
Well, good point there. When we talk about the cytokines, what they do, in my understanding, is they activate our immune response in the brain itself. And that causes all sorts of problems, especially when we're talking about the impact it has on neurotransmitters. Now we're talking biochemistry here, and we're taking a Western view on that. What can we, what do you, what call, why don't we start with why is it important? We know it's important to really look at our neuroinflammation because it affects our whole brain immunity and it affects our moods. It affects a cascade of things that are down the pipeline. But really,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead. No, go.
Yeah, when our brains are inflamed, you're absolutely right. It's throwing off our brain's ability to make those neurotransmitters, those chemicals that should be balanced to help us have a balanced mood. It also makes our stress response worse. So the stress makes our brain inflammation worse, but then the brain being inflamed makes our stress response worse. So it's this cascade of events. It also can, end up altering how our brain functions in other ways, such as memory and mood. In fact, why this is extra important is they often say that depression can be an early warning sign of Alzheimer's or other dementias. And that's because the same neuroinflammation from these gut issues and other problems, if they're go on unchecked, it gets worse. And as we get older, it can become dementia.
Well, it's really interesting because we're seeing so much of that. Also memory gets affected, and we're seeing a lot of that now with cognitive impairment with the elderly or dementia, however we want to define it, or at whatever level we would define it. It's really interesting from an Ayurvedic model of looking at this whole essence of depression. It's not so much we're not looking downstream where we are right now. Well, maybe upstream. We're looking now, go back downstream. And, we look at the Chinese model, traditional Chinese medicine, where there's a stagnation of flow, possibly. And then in the Ayurvedic model, it's too much stimulation. What happens and that's exactly what happens, like you're suggesting from the biochemical perspective, too much causes heat in the body. Think of inflammation as heat. So too much. And then what happens is when we cease to, what happens when we overexhaust ourselves, right? We heat it up and then it crashes, and that's where we get our depression. And so if we look at it as we always do, you and I, as a whole systems model, there's many factors, and maybe we could talk about that now. There's factors that really make us more vulnerable to, or make us more available to have neuroinflammation. And you mentioned the gut. So we could always start with what the famous thing we always talk about is diet. Our diet is
Mhm.
inflammatory. Just the way the processed foods are made today, it causes inflammation. So do you want to speak a little bit about that on when you see it with
Mhm.
your patients?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's just such a fundamental place to start, both from a perspective of gut health and how that affects the brain, but just how our diet can be inflammatory when we are eating excess carbs and simple sugars. It increases the oxidative stress in our bodies, and that's one of the things that contributes to neuroinflammation. Whereas if we're eating more complex carbohydrates and fruits and vegetables high in antioxidants, that's both supporting the health of our gut bacteria as well as reducing the strain on our body from that oxidative stress.
You know, it's really interesting when you were speaking about that and inflammation. I'm just going to step one more place to in a horizontal way. Our emotions also create the inflammation. And
Mhm.
what is the biggest emotion for inflammation would be anger, frustration, resentment. All of those that occur in the mind field have a direct have a direct imprint on the brain itself. So when we combine dietary inflammatory practices with the processed foods, not giving time the body to digest and rest, and then on
Mhm.
top of that, we then get frustrated. It's never one-sided. It's not, I'm angry, therefore I have to do something with my mind. You have to first, as we're talking about today, that's why we always integrate, you and I integrate the mind and the body together because they're one and the same. The body is just a physical manifestation of the energy fields of the mind. So when the mind becomes irritated or inflamed, it's going to send those signals. And that's what you're talking about with stress. We use the word stress, but you're sending signals, biochemical, hormonal signals, neurochemical, neurohormones. You're sending those signals throughout the body, causing damage. You're inflamed, totally inflamed. So let's talk just, we can wrap this up because you and I could probably talk an hour on this at least. What do you think we could, how can we advise? How do you advise your clients or your patients? For me, it's client. How do you advise them in cutting down or coming down with inflammation or bringing it down?
Yes, yeah. Um, we often talk about our level of inflammation as kind of like this bucket that's filling up with inflammation. And there's going to be all these different things that are contributing, and they'll be different for different people. You know, we mentioned diet and stress as common sources, but for many people, it could be chronic infections that haven't been dealt with, or as
Sure.
we saw in the last few years, some acute infections that are really ramping up the inflammation in our bodies. And then a really big one that we all need to be aware of is the effect that molds in our buildings can have on us. Over half the buildings in this country have sufficient damage to be growing mold. And not everyone is equally reactive to mold. Some people are particularly sensitive to these molds, but I think that's just another one of these things that needs to be on our radar and um, looking for these sources in our life beyond the things that we typically think of, like our diet and things like that, that might be a layer for us. We kind of have to look at all the different things that are causing this bucket of inflammation to fill up because at some point it just gets to be too much for our body. And if we can work on some of these layers, then we can get it to be manageable and help our long-term health on so many layers.
Good points you have there. You know, that's why the motto I've used over the years is let's remove what's causing the problem and then restore and rebuild to bring the system, the organism back into a homeostatic balance. You know, we could talk about sleep, right? We could avoid environmental toxins, all of those, good hydration. But again, we're meeting challenges that we've created such a toxic environment for ourselves globally. We've all done it. We've all participated in that. It's not one person we can point the finger on. So we know that we're in that situation now, and each one of us can just take our own little blueprint and work with ourselves on how to keep the environment clean. That's so important. And it rests our mind. Remember, if you're feeling inflamed, it's going to affect the mind. Remember, the mind is a bunch of thoughts in the respect that I'm speaking about mind now, but it's also affecting the body, and both of them are together. You can't do one without the other. If your body's off, your mind's going to be affected. And if your mind is off, your body's going to be affected. And it's not something to ever be ashamed of. For example, a physical disease like heart disease, or, you know, we talk about them very loosely, or diabetes, or any of these physical ailments, pain, but we think depression is something different. No, they're all the same. They're all the same. Diabetes has a mental component. Heart disease has a mental component. Depression has the mental component, but it has a physical component that's drawing it down and keeping it alive. So how do we get moving again? That's exercise. Even if I could say this from experience, even if you're down and out, make yourself get up and walk every morning, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes. Just get the body moving, because what is depression? It's when we become in a standstill. So in Chinese medicine, it's when the qi or the qi is not moving. It becomes stagnant. It's going to cause a depressed state. And, you know, liver is something we can look at, spleen, especially liver, spleen. And so all of these things, if we have the knowledge and the willingness to really address ourselves and say, you know, I'm ready to heal. I'm ready to heal. Everyone needs healing. Everyone, including myself and all of us. I mean, healing means to make whole, to be in homeostasis. So if you're feeling even tired, we have to heal from the tiredness. So we're talking on a very broad scale here. Everyone needs to really address their health now more than ever, because the environment is not supporting it to the same. That's my feeling, because the environment's really not supporting us the way it used to, because we've contaminated the environment. But so let's work our ways back. You know, we can work our way back. You've worked with people, you've worked with me. We've had things that we've done together where you've helped me move through things, and that's just the way it works, you know, taking the time, following a protocol, and not just shooting it from the hip. Let's see what sticks on the wall, you know, let's just throw all these supplements out, or not throw all these supplements out. No, first look at yourself systematically. Do you have a stress management? Do you know how to go to sleep? I mean, basic things that I know that I teach. People say, wow, I never even knew that. Because they're just basic, but yet the basic is what builds the foundation to live with prosperity and joy. What's the use of dragging around a corpse that feels lousy all the time? I've done it. I've really done it. So I could speak to everyone on that level because I've been there. And I am there at times, you know, I'm a human being just like everyone else. I have to work with things in a very methodical way, have to have a systematic approach. Okay, my day starts at 6 a.m. I have to get up at 4 if I want to do my meditation, etc. You see? Yeah, you have to make the effort. That's my point. I'm sure you deal with a lot of people where they do make the effort because they make an effort to come and see you. You know, they don't just have insurance come and pay and then, oh, it's okay, what will they give me? No, they have to make a real commitment, and then they can get a protocol that will actually help them in a holistic way. Again, that's my view on the whole situation.
Yes. And I particularly liked what you said about we shouldn't feel shame about
No.
depression. And I don't just see it with depression and mental health issues, but like many times when people have a health challenge and especially a mental health challenge, they do feel shame or like there's this stigma. But our society is moving away from that. But you are so absolutely right. It is often about forces greater than us, and not that we can't modify them or figure out how to better support our bodies so we can deal with them. But with our world now being so toxic, both chemically and emotionally and
Right.
stress-wise, it has a greater impact on us. Whereas maybe traditionally societies could have been more nurturing and our environment more healthy, and we didn't have this impact on us. So we have to kind of do a little more work than our great grandmothers maybe used to stay healthy. But we shouldn't look at it through a lens of us failing or somehow being wrong, but just that we need more support than we used to.
Good points there. Though, I'm going to end with saying this. Everyone has a mental health issue. Let's not pretend. Everyone does. If you wake up and you ever feel anxiety, hurt, you get angry, jealousy, resentment, that's mental health, right? All of us have those issues because we're human beings. So we can
Mhm.
cut through the chase. No one's any different than anyone else. Everyone is in the same boat. You might see what you see on social media. Half of that is just a game anyway that everyone's playing. Do not think that these things are real. Remember, the world is full of false prophets, profits, prophets. And everyone is experts in everything. Everyone's doing this and doing that and running around. But so please, everyone has a mental health issue. I think I put that in my book, Feeling Good Matters. I think I actually started with that. So get rid of the labels and just start working with yourself. You have an opportunity to just really thrive in life and enjoy life and just go forward. Just step out of the comfort zone. As I always said, take the lampshade off, step into light. Simple.
Mhm.
That's all we have to do, but you need a systematic approach. And I'm here to help, serve, whatever you want to call it. And Dr. Laurell is here. And until next time, stay happy and healthy. And keep writing in with your concerns, your questions, because we use them to create our content each week. So thanks for listening. Is there anything you'd like to say, Dr. Laurell, before we end? Are you
No,
okay?
you summed it up so perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.